Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.
You're watching Conversations with Jennylyn, and today I am super excited, and I try to dress the part because it is my debut Black Lives Matter show. I've decided to do this show in parallel with my COVID-19 World Interview Series because of all that's taking place in the world right now, and because I'm a Black woman. So why not? And I am very happy to share my beautiful guest with you. And she is Dr. Stephany Powell, a champion against human trafficking, and so much more that let's hope we can get it all in half an hour. Welcome, Stephany.
How are you? Thank you so much for inviting me to your show.
Oh, I am thrilled that you had the time to spend with me. There is so much going on in the world right now that if you let yourself get too wrapped up in it, it can take your peace. So
yes.
I am just taking them one at a time. And today my focus is Black Lives Matter, but I would like to learn about you and your championship program against human trafficking. And then we can talk some about Black lives. So
Okay.
I'll let you begin with whichever topic you feel comfortable.
Well, I'll start with my background, and then that will make it easier. And then if you have any questions.
Okay.
So I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, raised in South Central LA. I am a doctor of education and organizational leadership. I taught elementary school for LAUSD for about 4 years. And then I became a police officer for the Los Angeles Police Department, and I stayed for 30 years. My last assignment was in Vice, and Vice deals with the crime of prostitution. It deals with anything that's alcohol beverage related. When I retired, I kind of kid and say, you know, I do what baby boomers do. We don't just retire, we keep working. So my keep working was that I'm the executive director of an organization that helps victims of human trafficking. And my interest stems from me being a sergeant that was in charge of a Vice unit. So that's what I am, that's what I'm doing now. I'm the executive director of an organization by the name of Journey Out, and we help the adult victims of domestic human trafficking in the Los Angeles area.
What a great cause. I'm sure human trafficking has been happening throughout the different evolutions of this world, but lately we've had a lot more attention brought to it. Why do you think this is so?
Well, I think for a couple reasons. One is what human trafficking, what human sex trafficking is forced prostitution. So when you say it that way, then people go like, oh, I know what that is. And oh, yes, it's been around for a long time. The name has changed to human trafficking. And I think because of that, it became more palatable for people to want to understand and for them to see that those that are forced into prostitution are victims, that they're not out there by choice. So I think it was that shift in the education of society, as well as the laws have been shifted. And the other interesting thing, since we're talking about Black Lives Matter, and if we start talking about the aspect of institutionalized racism, what we find is there are a lot of African American girls, unfortunately, that have been victims of human trafficking. But however, when you Google human trafficking, the images that pop up are your blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls. And so I think what has happened, when you see those pictures, you attach human trafficking to that, it evokes more empathy, and people really want to get involved. And so I think that that's why they're seeing so much talk about it. People want to help so much, but when you really get down into the weeds of what it really is, you might start to see a whole different picture.
Well, I just think it's sick. And I think whichever culture you speak with, whichever denomination, whichever ethnic group, you will discover that this is true there as well. A lot of Spanish girls, a lot of Vietnamese girls, just people. I guess men as well. Do they traffic men as much as women?
Yes, they do. They do traffic men, but when you look at it from a statistical lens, the numbers are not high, and that's only because it's underreported. And it's underreported for a couple of reasons. One is that male victims of human trafficking feel that if they report it, they're not going to they won't be believed. They might think in terms of the social how society see men, and they cannot believe that. How could you possibly be a victim? You're a man. So not being believed and the shame that might come along with it. And then lastly, not even wanting to go to nonprofits because they feel that nonprofits are geared more toward women. So it is very underreported. So we don't know what the true numbers are. We just know that they're out there.
Wow. What was the most challenging thing for you as a female officer dealing with this?
Dealing with human trafficking?
Yes, the trafficking of women especially.
I think the challenge for me, and I'll just very quickly tell a story that will probably stay with me forever. There was a young woman, she probably was in her 20s. We had arrested her a couple of times for prostitution. And we hadn't seen her in a while, in a few months. And then when I saw her, she was working out on the, we call prostitution tracks with Blade. So we saw her working on the Blade, and she had to have been about 8, 9 months pregnant. And so when we work undercover, so when we went by her, I'm going like, there's no way she's working. So when the undercovers approached her, sure enough, she was working. Anyway, so we end up arresting her. We go to book her into jail. And when you're pregnant, you have to be examined before they actually will book you in. And the exam was just like the exam you and I went through while we were pregnant. And that, first off, really connected me to her as being a woman. Really connected her, really the connection of being a woman. And so when they were examining her, I was talking to her and I said, well, what are you having? And she said, I'm having a girl. And so we started into this conversation of, hey, you got to get off the streets because she is relying on you. And she took my hand and she placed it on her stomach. And we both felt the baby move. And I can't tell you what that feeling was like, but it was a connection, a bond. I'm thinking to myself, here we are both women, and she's in a very vulnerable position, but at that moment right then and there, we shared an unborn life, so to speak. It's really hard to put into words. Anyway, I felt terrible having to leave her there, but I did. But the best part about this is I would say about 6 months later, we are in El Pollo Loco, me and my team, and she walked in with the baby in the stroller, and she sees me and hugs me and says, I was just coming down to the station to show you the baby, and I stopped here to get something to eat. So when it happened to her, once she got out, she was able to find a nonprofit to take care of her, and that was taking care of her and her baby. So I think for me, that was a real turning point for me of really understanding that people are not out there by choice. And what I did find out during the conversation was that she was being pimped out. So.
That's such a great story. That must have made you feel like, job well done.
Yeah.
because you clearly had an impact on her and she turned her life around, and I hope she stays off the streets.
Yeah, I do too. We didn't see her since, so I'm hoping so.
So do you feel that this is a situation that will ever be able to get under control, human trafficking? Do you ever see an end to this? Do you ever see it being controlled?
I probably see it more of being controlled and in a lesser sense than completely eradicated, especially if we're talking about globally. Because like you had started off saying before about how many women and girls are put in these situations around the world, you know, India, the Philippines, especially places where women are not on an equal footing.
Yes.
And so when I think of it in those terms, I can't say in my heart of hearts eradicate it. I would love to, people throw that around, but realistically, but I'll tell you what I really believe what it's going to take. It's going to take shows like what you're doing. It's going to take awareness. It's going to be us teaching our girls that they are enough, that they have boundaries that absolutely will not be crossed. Because a lot of times when we look at human trafficking in the United States, the victim has some type of relationship with the person who is pimping her out. That could be a family member, it could be a boyfriend, it could be a friend, right? So and a lot of times it's developed out of a romantic type of relationship where the girl gets involved with a guy who she thinks is her boyfriend, and she's doing this for him. You know, I think sometimes when we as women feel that we are enough, we don't need someone else to validate us. And so if we don't need someone else to validate us, then it's okay to say no. It's okay when we walk away from that, because in our heart of hearts, we're still validated. Because when that person walked away, they did not devalue who you were. And so I think that awareness piece is so important. So in California, they did pass a bill in which human trafficking has to be taught in middle and high school.
Oh, great. I didn't know that.
It's a great bill. However, it didn't come with any money.
Oh, no.
Not all of the schools have been able to actually move it forward. But however, there's still legislation where they're talking about possibly talk about human trafficking from age 5, you know, from kindergarten, 1st grade to 12th grade. Now, of course, it would be age appropriate. And I am all for that. So what it would probably look like for a kindergarten would probably be more so of, again, setting boundaries, high self-esteem, good touch, bad touch, because I know that's some of the things that they talk about now, and their body being theirs. And I think that by teaching that, and as they grow up, that morphing into the fears and red flags of human trafficking will just organically take place. But I think education is the key, not only for the kids, but for the adults, and then law enforcement to arrest traffickers, and for nonprofits to be able to be there for those victims so that they have the ability to testify in court against their traffickers. So as you can see, there is a lot of moving pieces. So do I think it could be completely eradicated? I would hope so, but I think I just don't see that happening, but I do see it being controlled and possibly lessened.
And I think some women have been taught from a young age that they didn't have any value by either someone they trusted, someone that they really counted on. And so they have this mentality of not being worthy. And so even though you may teach them in school, you know, what human trafficking is, because they're so vulnerable, it may be difficult in all cases to change that mindset. so that you'll always probably have some victims, which I'm hoping is not true, but just based on human nature. Because so many people know situations and things that they're involved in are not good. But it's easier to stay in a bad situation than to find the courage to change it sometimes. So people just settle for what they have because of what it is, in a false sense, feels safe to them.
Yeah, and and then as you were talking, I was thinking about how the other moving piece is the objectification of women, right? So
Exactly.
we have to start reaching this point where women are not seen as entertainment, and that we don't see ourselves as entertainment in terms of our own self-objectification, right? Because when you're seen as entertainment, it dehumanizes you. It takes out the human aspect of it. So I think that is a key as well. So men also have to really get involved in this anti-trafficking movement as well, to say that their kids are not for sale, and they too are not going to get involved in any activity of objectification of women.
I am just so overwhelmed by all of this negativity that's taking place in the world, you know? I reflect on my childhood and remember that I think social media is bringing all of these things that were probably always there to the surface, and it's so much more accessible, so it's more in your face. But it created a false sense of protection as a child because you didn't hear any of this. That is why the contrast is so blinding.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And wanted to say the other thing that is really important in a journey out, I would say about 85 to 90% of our clients were molested as children. And so that's why I think early on, kids learning good touch, bad touch, that people don't get to do whatever they want to your body. So when you think about it, if you have someone who's 23 that was being molested as a young child, they learn that they can't say no when it comes to their body. So why wouldn't that open them up to vulnerabilities when it comes to someone who is trying to traffic them or pimp them out? It just all unfortunately goes hand in hand.
Very, very true. Now, if I didn't ask you this question, I'll probably get killed. As a former police officer, what do you have to say with what's going on now with all these Black people getting killed by white police officers? And when you were an active police officer, did you ever see that? And how did you deal with your counterparts that were perpetrators if you had? And answer me honestly.
Man, that's like a 20-part question, but okay.
Take it apart, girl, and go with it.
Oh my God, I can't begin to tell you how many times my phone has rang. I recently did the D.L. Hughley show on this whole
Right? Yeah.
issue. Wow, where do I start? So I'll just, let me say this, and I'm always honest. Whenever anyone asks me, I'm always
Thank
honest.
you for that.
I don't look for people that agree with me or not.
Conversations with Jennylyn is after honesty.
There you go. So one thing, so let me put it in perspective. When I came on LAPD, okay, so I don't want anybody trying to count to figure out how old I am. I'm just going to tell you I'm old. But I started in 1983. That's when I came on LAPD. What people I don't think realized was LAPD had just gone through a consent decree in like 1978, 1979. And the consent decree said that they had to hire more women and more people of color, and they lowered the height range to 5'4", because it used to be, I want to say 5'8". Yeah, 5'8". Couldn't be shorter than 5'8". So that opened up more of the floodgates. So when I came on, there were hardly any women. So they weren't used to women being on the job. When I went to my first division, there were 3 women, me being one of them, and we were on separate watches, so I was always in the locker room by myself. I cannot say that I was welcomed by everybody. There were some people that I was, there were some people that I wasn't. But I was told that I had 3 strikes against me, that I was Black, was short, and I was female, because I'm only 5'3". And the person that told me that, I said, I can't change any of those. So,
Good for you.
And I think for me going in, because I had already had my degree and I had already taught school, I just figured if this doesn't work out, then I'll just go back to teaching. And the one thing, in being from South Central LA, of course, I had my idea of what policing was about, and it was not favorable, because whenever they would come into my neighborhood, somebody's getting beaten or going to jail. And I remember I was teaching and my father said, LAPD is hiring. And I was like, why would I want to join LAPD? Like, why would I want to be a part of that? And this is what he said. And I think this was really important for me. And I carried this through my 30 years. He said, the termite is a small insect that can take a building down from within. So be the termite. And I carried that.
Wow.
And I carried that with me. And I really believe that just my mere presence alone made a difference. I never got called the N-word by officers. I never heard them call anybody that, but it wasn't because they may not have been saying it. They knew not to say that around me, because I was not the one. Because I was like a tattletale. I'm going to tell it. I'm going to go to the captain. I'm going to tell it. They knew that I would speak out on things. So I made that very clear in my presence. And then when I became a sergeant, sometimes I would have to read arrest reports. If the arrest report did not have the probable cause for the arrest, I would ask, where's the probable cause for the stop? If they couldn't tell me that, I had no problem saying, you got to kick them. You don't have anything here. So I think because I led my career in that way, that I didn't see certain things. Now, what was important to me is police officers are human. I'm human. If I had an uncooperative suspect that's calling me everything but a child of God, I had a partner who could see in my eyes this was not going well, and then they would take over for me. They were like, okay, I got this. And then I would do the same. Or if I saw that I had, I remember specifically, I was working with a guy who was a little hot-headed. It was a white guy, and we had stopped these 2 black guys, 2 black youth. And he was rude to them. And I could see they were getting pissed off. And I stepped in and told them, only talk to me. Don't listen to him, only talk to me. Because if you don't only talk to me, and if you say something or you try to hit him, it's gonna all go bad. So only talk to me. And so those are the things, and they did. So those are the things that I would do. I worked Foothill Division where the Rodney King incident occurred.
You did?
Yeah, I worked there. I went there after the actual incident. They needed, of course, bringing in more black officers into Foothill Division. And I ended up being the community liaison person for Pacoima Lakeview Terrace. And Pacoima Lakeview Terrace was a black section of San Fernando Valley, and it was Lakeview Terrace where the Rodney King incident happened. So I was there during the riot. But I got in there talking to the community, talking to my captain saying, this is what the community needs, this is what the community wants. We need to pay attention to their needs. And on the day of the riots, Pacoima Lakeview Terrace did not burn. It should have burned because that's where all of it happened. It should have burned because foothill officers were not doing the right thing. Some foothill officers, not all. Some were not doing the right things in the community, but it didn't burn because there was a relationship that was built. There was a trust that was built. And when I formed that trust with the gang members as well. And when I told them, the worst thing you want to do is burn down your own neighborhood because where's your mother going to go shop? The worst thing you can do is have people come down in here and burn down your neighborhood because they leave what you have. And so some of those gang members actually got in front of some of the liquor stores and kept them from burning. So that was my experience with LAPD. Were there racial issues going on? Absolutely. Were there gender-based issues that were going on? Absolutely. But for me, I learned how to not only navigate, but to make a difference, or command staff would come to me and say, these are the issues. I'm not Black. How do you think we can fix this? So I became the termite. I didn't take the whole building down, but I was able to at least put out fires. I was a fire putting out type of termite.
I like that termite. You know, I feel like there are good people and bad people in the world. And I think it's even sometimes beyond color, ethnicity, religion, culture. It's just bad people in all of those sectors, all of those categories of life. And I feel on the bad people are just wired that way and they have no interest in doing anything that is light or good. And they exist in the Asian cultures, in the Black cultures, in the white cultures. But I have to tell you, because it's not easy to look at me and detect that I'm Black. I have seen and experienced a lot of the racial prejudice against Blacks. And some people just have it against color in someone's skin. That is so, to me, that's ignorance, number one. And number two, a lot of times I didn't keep my tongue between my teeth. A lot of times I did, because it happened in places of employment. And I thought, I need my paycheck as much as them, so I'm just going to be the diplomat here and not get cliquey with these people. But there was one situation that's left an indelible mark on my mind about how racist people could be. And it's where they were sending these Black jokes within the company's internal communication system. And every day these Black jokes would fly around. And I was a director there, so I had a private office, so they couldn't see my reaction. I would cringe when I read them. And then one day they sent a joke, which I'm not going to tell on this show because it's not appropriate. And that's where I drew the line and walked outside into the main lobby and called everyone's attention. And I go, hey guys, listen up. I'm a Black woman. And they're like, what are you talking about? You're not Black. You know, and then I think I could see the tapes playing back in their heads. Is she serious? What jokes did we send, you know? I could see their reaction was visible, that they were like trying to retract what did they send and go over in their heads. And then they started to argue with me that I wasn't Black. They thought I was trying to be funny until I whipped out a family photo. And they saw my mother and my sisters and brothers. And I have sisters and brothers of varying shades of Black. Some are light skinned, some are dark skinned. My mother had 7 children. And my mother is mixed with a little bit of Chinese and Portuguese. So the kids came out different looks and colors. But I'm the only child that my mother has who looks like me because I'm her first child and my father was Lebanese. So I know what the prejudice against Black people can be. And there were some times I was happy I was this color because I wouldn't want to be subject to what I hear and see. And this is why when I was asked to do this segment, several people wrote to me and asked me to do a segment on Black Lives Matter. I felt like I should do it because I know I could be somebody who could be considered an outsider because most people don't know that I have any Black connections.
You know, God, I can only imagine the things that were said in front of you when they didn't think that you were Black. You know, and I think in your answer in terms of the police, because people ask this question, and this part I did not answer, is how do I feel about what happened with
Yes, I was going to come back to it.
So with George Floyd, obviously that was a murder. That should not have happened. There is no training in which you put your knee in someone's carotid. I don't even know what that was about. But for you to do that for that amount of time to that officer, Mr. Floyd's life did not matter to him. And so I know we throw around the term, Black Lives Matter, and people will say all lives matter, and all lives do matter. But what has been always taken out of that phrase is Black lives. Because when you grow up in a system, when you grow up around people where you deal with those things like you talked about at work, when you look at our health system, our education system, you feel like your life doesn't matter because you walk around society feeling as though you are invisible. And so all we say is that Black Lives Matter. It's kind of like me too. My life matters too. All lives matter, but my life matters too. If we say that cancer kills, well, we're talking about, if we say that brain cancer kills, just as an example, we're not eliminating all cancers. We're just saying, hey, pay attention to brain cancer because maybe it doesn't have a cure. So when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not negating other people's lives. We're just saying, look at us. Look what has happened to us in 400 years. Look what has happened to us as a result of that. Look at all the things you do not know about Black Americans that you sit next to and you work with every day. And just know that our lives are equally as important.
And well said, because I feel that a lot of people experience discrimination in different ways. Some people culturally, because other people think their culture is weird because they can't relate. And some people, because they're from a particular ethnic group and it has been tabooed or put in a box, and because that box is not the quote unquote cool box, they're discriminated against. So there's so many forms of discrimination. But I think historically, Black people have been treated worse than most because it links back to slavery. And even though slavery has been abolished so long ago, I feel that some Black people are still enslaved to the people who are ignorant, to the people who are angry, to the people who feel superior. And oftentimes, those people are in a hierarchy and somehow have control of the lives of some of those Black people. And I think that is, and for example, the police force. No one can argue that a lot of innocent Black people, maybe they're innocent because they weren't given a chance to be proven guilty and they're dead. So they can't stand here to prove their innocence or to be judged to determine if they were guilty or not, because they're now dead. And if you've got your knee on someone's neck, I don't care what color they are, and they're telling you you can't breathe, all you simply have to do is move it and restrain them in some other way. So when something like this happens, and I wasn't there, and I was trying not to get too wrapped up in it because these things get me angry. And so I just do, I get enough information to know what's going on, and then I detach. But it has happened too many times.
And there's a need for police reform.
Exactly.
There's definitely a need for police reform.
Exactly. So my question to you is, if you could make a change, what would it be to eliminate more of these types of incidents from happening?
I think, wow, so in a perfect world, I think it's important. I would like to see more women on these police forces. I would like to see more people of color, and that's all colors. I think that it really helps when the officers reflect the communities that they serve because they understand them. They understand the issues. I think they need to take a strong look at their use of force policies. And then that's the thing everybody needs to understand. Every police department is different. So they might have different policies. So where the chokehold might have still been a policy in one place, and another place it might have still been there but only as a last resort. And then there's some places where you can't use it at all. So shooting policies and chokehold policies might be different. I think that training is needed. Training on implicit bias, training on cultural humility, learning that because someone's culture is different from you, or because a stereotype is portrayed in society, doesn't mean that everybody is like that, or people that look like that are dangerous. So and these are just a few things off the top of my head that I think are important, that there's a need for police reform. I don't think police should be abolished. I think that would be a mistake.
I think so too. I agree.
And that becomes a walking away issue. So if we get rid of the police, okay, so now they walk away. Well, who's going to police us? Because we need that in society. Because we know America, it can be considered a violent society. So instead of walking away, we need to sit down at the table. And when I say we, I mean community grassroots organizations, police departments, politicians. Sit at the table and figure out what is the best way to reform this thing that's going to be best for everyone. So that off the top of my head, that's what I came up with.
I love that answer. I love that you also said they should have more women, because I feel women have more compassion. Men, don't hate me. But I know that I have so much compassion, and most of my female friends are very compassionate people as well. I think because we have this maternal instinct, it somehow links into like an overdose of compassion sometimes, although there are some women that are very cold and hard. So let's hope for a change, because we cannot go on like this. It's creating unnecessary division among people. And at the end of the day, we're all God's children. We all have red blood and the same bone structure and need to breathe and do all the same things. So
I say if we turned ourselves inside out, we'd all look the same.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. We are out of time, but before I go, what would you like to leave with my viewers?
You know, what I would like to leave is we're in a very turbulent time, regardless of whether it's COVID or whether the unrest and discussions as it pertains to race. I just really want us to get to a point where we start to understand one another, because I think people need to understand the police as well, because they're having a hard time because they believe everybody hates them. And these are the good officers that are trying to do a good job. So although it might seem cliche, what I just wish is that we all would just love each other and see each other as human beings with feelings.
I agree with you 1000%. I just said those exact words to someone last night. Why can't we just all see each other like we are here because God put us here, and we have a right to be here, and we all just need to love each other, respect each other. It's difficult to respect some people, but you have to take the high road always, as much as you can. And people don't hate the police. Not all the police are bad. Thank you so much, Dr. Powell. I have thoroughly enjoyed my time with you, and I hope the same is true for you.
Yes.
And let's do what we can to make a difference in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Everyone can make a change. You are welcome. And again, thank you. Thank you for watching Conversations with Jennylyn. When a conversation is all you need to be inspired, and I'm sure this beautiful woman sitting across from me has definitely inspired you. And I will see you next time.